how building an organization is like building a paper airplane. So I want to tell you a story about my little nonprofit. It's called Iridescent. The name Iridescent epitomizes the value we hope to bring in the world. Iridescent means something beautiful, something multicolored, lustrous. We believe that when you understand a concept, you begin to see its manifestations everywhere around you. So if you learn a little bit about light and shadows, you begin to see more depth, more texture. If you learn about how a bird takes in its wings in its upstroke and fans them out in a downstroke, you see the same movement in swimmers, in turtles, and other living creatures. So the world becomes very interesting. It becomes multicolored. It becomes iridescent. What we do on a day-to-day basis is we help engineers and scientists communicate the real-world applications of science to children. The goal is to inspire and support a child to be curious and persistent. What I want to share today is a few of the strategies that have worked really well for us and what others told me not to do. They told me not to go for the harder thing. I believe doing the right thing no matter how hard it is. They told me not to pay attention to seemingly trivial details like beauty and aesthetics. They told me that you cannot dream about galloping when you haven't learned to walk. I knew a couple of things, and I knew them from my childhood and the way I've been brought up. I knew parents are very powerful role models. The only reason why I stand here today is because my parents modeled curiosity and persistence for me. I also knew that children do not get the opportunity to see their parents in a professional setting. So instead of helping out in the family business or the shop, they spend 14 hours a week in front of the television. I also knew that engineers spend the entire day in front of a computer screen and crave some kind of contact with the real world. And so the model for Iridescent is to help engineers communicate the real-world aspects of science in an environment where a parent can model curiosity and persistence. Success for us is when a child tries multiple times to make her airplane model work until it actually flies. I started in the Los Angeles Unified School District, and I only knew 2 teachers. They were both very enthusiastic and brave, and they offered to pilot the first Iridescent Family Science courses. This was back in 2006. The 2 schools were Johnny Cochran Middle School and Audubon Middle School. We prepared for a very long time. We spread the word about the sessions, and we waited excitedly for the families to pour in. We got no one. The teacher was so mortified that she went around the neighborhood trying to pick up stray kids and offering them pizza. When they came in through the door, we pounced on them with science. Turned out that not one of them went to Johnny Cochran. It was okay. So they learned a lot about how airplanes fly, and the best part was that they came back the next week with their parents and learned more about the physics of bird flight. Audubon School was worse. We didn't learn. Our engineers spent 10 weeks preparing a course on the physics behind musical instruments, and we got 1 child, and that was the teacher's daughter. I was so mortified and just very confused, because this sort of bore out all what the education experts had warned me against. I spent the next week preparing each one of these 17 posters that I went and posted all over the school, and then we got 1 more child. To the credit of the engineers, they came back every week and they taught those 2 little girls. This was sort of a big turning point for me, because I had to make a very hard decision. Do I keep going, or do I listen to what the education experts were saying in my ear? They were saying that parents were too stressed and too tired to come back to school in the evenings, that parents were scared of science, that people rather spend their evenings in front of a television screen, and that the whole thing didn't sound like fun anyway. But the few parents and children that did come to our sessions, they told me how powerful the experience had been for them, that this was the first time they'd spent 2 uninterrupted hours learning and building together with one another, and building something new, something that didn't exist before. Usually a parent's interaction with their child was very negative. It was, have you done your homework? And this was the first time that the child could see the parent modeling learning together. And they told me that this was different and it was fun. And so I kept going for 5 years. I taught constantly in different situations, in schools, in libraries, in science centers, aquariums, and even in my neighborhood park. Only one child came again. I kept learning a lot. I learned how to present at back-to-school nights with videos. I learned that you cannot have water-related experiments in winter. The little ones get wet and they cry when they're cold, and then the parents have to leave early. I learned that engineers need to go and talk to children beforehand so that the children get excited and then they drag their parents. I knew I was doing the right thing, even if I was getting like 3 families at every session. And so I kept reading and learning, and building my infrastructure brick by brick. I worked with an information visualization group. It's called Density Design in Milan. And they built this tool for me that would help me identify the most needy and the most low-performing schools in a new city. Let me just play the video for you. So this is a map of LA, and you can pick a bunch of schools wherever you want to work, and you can modify and you can manipulate variously publicly available data variables. In this example, on the y-axis, you see academic performance index. So the bubbles on the bottom of the screen are basically your lowest performing schools, and you can see Audubon Middle School, true to form, being the one at the bottom right corner. People didn't understand why I was investing so much time and effort into a tool when I was only working at 5 schools. But I knew that it would take, in 2 to 3 years, I would need such a tool like this, and that's how long it takes to perfect something. Another big infrastructure piece that I invested in was an internal project management site called Basecamp. It was a huge leap of faith. It cost $39 a month to subscribe to, and that doesn't sound like much, but it is when you only make $2,000 the entire year. But I knew I needed the infrastructure, and I knew I needed to start right. And we spent a lot of time developing new engineering curriculum and stories. This is a mural that one of my most amazing science illustrators and artists, Joanna Irma, designed. You can see some of our courses represented here. We have a course on hot air balloons, flying and swimming creatures, how the ear works, how the eye works, trusses and bridges, physics of roller coasters, physics of sailing, wind turbines, and jet engines. We learned a lot about how to support an engineer to communicate her passion with a 6-year-old. We learned that engineers, you cannot cut corners, and that you cannot give engineers a script. Kaplan does that. But engineers have to talk from the heart about what they love. We also banned PowerPoint. Every time you give PowerPoint to an engineer, they cover every inch of that slide with bullet points. You have to show, not tell. Materials have to be super low cost so that the families can continue building at home, and then they can continue the learning that we started. Every semester, we learn something critical and something completely new, and I hope that kind of learning never stops. Here's some of the feedback that we kept getting from the parents and children that told me that we were on the right track. That I got to work with my dad because I've never really worked with him. I would tell them that it is cool because you never knew you fly something. The English is not always right. I think it was the fact how every flight changes when you use different techniques. I think you go to MBA school for this, right? The idea, most part of understanding, is how you have to make different changings and just not throwing it away. This is a dad who brought his son to our cardiovascular mechanics sessions. At that point, he was working in Santa Barbara, which is a full 100 miles away. And every Wednesday afternoon, he would drive down so that he could bring his son to these sessions. He told me he did this because this was the first time his son had expressed interest in anything other than sports. And this was the first time that he had bought a book for his son. It was a book on the heart. This is a mom who brought her daughter to our science of sporting equipment sessions. And she used to always look very tired. So one day I asked her about what she did. She told me that her day started at 3 in the morning at the USC cafeteria, and she worked 2 jobs. She came to our sessions because this was the only time she felt respected and acknowledged as a powerful influence in her daughter's life. Most of the times, people wouldn't think that she had the know-how or the background or the education to be even a voice in determining where her daughter went. The other thing that I felt very strongly about was communicating our vision through beautiful materials. I worked very early on with Joanna, and we did a bunch of projects. This is a poster we made on Reynolds number, or how a fluid medium feels to creatures of different sizes, all the way from an amoeba that you don't see on the screen to the whale. The poster never drew the crowds we expected, and so we made it into a T-shirt. And the T-shirt has been great at building a sense of community between the engineers and the families. This is a T-shirt on how an MRI machine works. We had an MRI researcher help us with this. And this is a T-shirt that tells the story of a copper electron as it goes through different devices that generate electricity. Again, people didn't understand why I spent so much time and effort on these projects, especially when both of them were so scarce. But every time anybody came to our website or saw one of our T-shirts, they told me that they got it. They got that science was alive, it was beautiful, vibrant, and a part of our lives. So all these projects and programs I was running on volunteer support and lots of love. But I knew that expansion needed funds. And I had set my sights on a big National Science Foundation grant, a $3 million grant for 5 years. And I knew it was going to be a couple of years before I got it. So the first year I applied, I'd only done those 2 miserable courses at Johnny Cochran and Audubon. And I got a very polite letter from the review panel saying, number one, I didn't have a PhD. And number two, I was crazy to project such kind of growth with no track record. So I kept going. I addressed all their concerns except the PhD part, and I built a very robust program. I applied to the foundation for 3 years in a row, and each proposal takes about 250 hours to write. And then last year we were finally awarded this grant. The project is called Be a Scientist, and it brings together the University of Southern California, the Cooper Union, New York Hall of Science, the Natural History Museum in LA, and the USC Cinema School. The goal is to support the same group of families over a period of 5 years. And I want to show a video of one of our students, Nick, from these sessions. And he's very dejected because his model hasn't worked and he's kept trying. And he says that he cannot be a smart astronaut. And his mom is encouraging him. And this, for us, is success. The parent taking over where we leave off.
Crisscross and stuff. Yes, I don't think I'll be able to be a smart astronaut. You gotta keep working at it. You will. You just keep working at it and doing little bit by little bit and changing it around and coming up with new creativity. So next week you have to just really be ready. Ready and think about what I'm gonna start making. Right.
So the NSF project was a big victory for us, but our major breakthrough came through the Office of Naval Research. Last year, they awarded us a $6.8 million grant to expand to 4 cities. We are now operating in Los Angeles, New York City, the San Francisco Bay Area, and in Minneapolis. They were the only ones to believe in our ambitious vision, and they encouraged us to do even bigger and greater things. And so we did. We launched 2 engineering design studios, one in South LA, one in New York City in the Bronx. Our goal for these studios is to have an engineering tinkering space for children of all ages year-round. And in less than 6 months, we are running programs round the clock, during the day, after school, during summer. These are the family science sessions in the evenings, and even high school explainer programs. We've launched 4 mobile science education phone applications. We've published 2 books on our experiments, one in English and Spanish, and we've even co-produced a Science of Cooking show on Top Chef Masters. The only reason we've been able to do so much and move so fast has been because we dreamed of conquering the world from day one. We planned for the long term when there was no short term, and we dreamt of galloping when we didn't know how to walk. And this kind of courage or hubris comes from the fact that you really have a blind faith in your vision and in your ability to execute. And that in turn comes from the fact that you know you're doing the right thing and that you're true to your values. Our goal, these are our sessions now, and they have more than 100 participants, although attendance is still very temperamental. We're still figuring that one out. We went back to Johnny Cochran and Audubon, and we had some very successful family science sessions. And the engineer who volunteered at Audubon still remains an unscarred and enthusiastic volunteer. We've helped 400 engineers convey their passion with 9,000 underserved children and parents. And our vision is to be the #1 provider for amazing engineering experiments with children and to support every child who wants to imagine, invent, and engineer. With my amazing team by my side, many of them who are here, I plan to do this in the next 5 years. And I wanted to end with this little video of one of my students.
I think it's important to learn science because I say the world needs more scientists. And that's what I want to be when I grow up.
Thank you.